If you were to walk along the south coast of Britain in the early 1800s, you may have seen, up on the cliff's edge, risking life and limb, precariously digging at the rock face, Mary Hanson. And what Mary had seen was to change the scientific world forever. Hello and welcome, you rogue rustle of raptors, to Remember, the show all about histories, mysteries, and boning. It's always been about boning, or as the professionals seem to want to call it, paleontology.
I like how partway through the show, you just decided, hey, I'm going to change the way we open the show and make it my thing, my own thing. It's always been about Matthew's thing. And so now I feel like I can't do a did you know at the start of my things. I have to do a something. It's always been about that.
No, you can do your and did you know things, and I've got my own thing, which is that it's always been about boning.
It's always been about boning. And you know, in a lot of ways, it has been.
I'm joined by the sweet summer belle, that is Paulidelatron Skunkosaurus, and my name is Matthew Jude, the greatest boner of them all.
Oh my gosh.
This week, we are digging deep into the world of paleontology, which, you know what, doesn't sound that interesting, does it? But look, everyone goes through a dinosaur phase. I know I did.
Who isn't interested in the idea of digging for dinosaur bones? Everyone right now immediately went back to their 7-year-old self who was like, yeah, of course I want to go somewhere and dig in the ground and find a really cool old skeleton.
Everyone goes through a dinosaur period, and some of us just grow up and just never get over it. Did you go through a dinosaur phase then?
I mean, honestly, who doesn't? I remember more my little brother's dinosaur phase than my own, because I'm 7 years older than him, so I fully witnessed his own dinosaur phase. But I also watched a lot of The Land Before Time, as we know, because I did reference it in our Newsies episode a couple episodes ago.
At length. I was in so much of a dinosaur phase that eventually my whole family decided to go on holiday to the south coast of Britain to a place called West Bay, which is near Lyme Regis, which is where this story takes place. You know, we'd go to a place called Chesil Beach and just bring back cars full of rocks.
She's like, great. Guess put them in the backyard. At least they weren't shells that actually kind of start to smell because things used to live inside them. You know what I mean?
True.
What's your favorite dinosaur, Matthew?
Favorite dinosaur?
I have 3 favorites.
You tell me yours.
Okay, well, the first one is one that no one's ever heard of. It's called Saltopus, and he's an early dinosaur. And I know about him because we used to have this, cassette tape full of dinosaur, kids singing dinosaur songs. And one was about Saltopus. He looked kind of like a little chicken. Saltopus, Saltopus, he was small, but he came first, scurrying from bush to bush, surely must be Saltopus, is the song. And then I also really love the Stegosaurus and the Ankylosaurus.
I'm going to say that in my tops, Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus definitely rank.
They're good ones.
If I'm going 4-footed dinosaur, Triceratops my favorite.
Also a good one.
But I have to be honest and say that
T-Rex.
I know that it's cliche.
You're such a boy.
It's so difficult to beat the T-Rex. I liked velociraptors a lot. I was really into velociraptors.
My little brother also was very into velociraptors.
But then you realize they weren't quite as big as you thought they were going to be? I don't know.
We saw dinosaurs together at the Natural History Museum in London that one time.
I thought for a second you were going to say, we saw a Triceratops once. And I was like, I just don't think you did.
No, we didn't. I dreamed that. But it was a vivid dream. Will you keep the sneeze in or edit it out? Who knows?
We did with the British Museum. Or were we at the
We were at the Natural History Museum to see the dinosaurs, but we've been to the British Museum, we've been to the V&A, we've been to the National Picture Gallery.
I take you to all the galleries.
We've We've been to a lot of places.
I also actually am hugely a big fan of the Diplodocus, or Diplodocus, depending on how you choose to say it.
The names are always changing, right? Like,
Man, dinosaurs are cool.
who even knows, though? Like, did they really... They could just take any bones they find and just put them together any old way and then be like, this was an ancient animal. Like, how do we know?
Well, a little bit of that is going to be solved for you right now. Mary Anning was born in Lyme Regis, which is in Dorset on the south coast of the UK, a place that I know very well.
I've heard it on train stop announcements, I feel like.
I don't think you have.
I feel like I've heard people say Lyme Regis in British accents, so...
When you've come to near me, I live near somewhere called Rowley Regis. So maybe that's what you've heard.
Maybe, but sometimes they're like, the train goes, final stop, Lyme Regis. On the way.
I can guarantee you right now, Lyme Regis is not a final stop on any train track in the UK.
Okay, well, maybe I dreamed it just like that time we saw a Triceratops.
The coast, which is now often called the Jurassic Coast, and while that name would come after Mary's death, she was certainly the one who noticed that things around Dorset were not all from her time. Her father was a carpenter, along with her mother Molly. They moved to Lyme at the end of the 1700s, and they were known as Congregationalists, which is a Christian denomination I had not heard of.
Yeah. Doesn't everyone have a congregation?
Well, this is a branch of Calvinism, which itself is a branch of Protestantism.
Right.
Congregationalist churches are essentially vehemently and purposefully independent and can essentially do whatever they want, regardless of what even other Congregationalist churches do. It all sounds a bit dangerous to me, but this was not an easy path to walk. They were known as essentially dissenters. Being a Congregationalist barred you from military ranks, from universities. And in a lot of ways, it barred you from society at large. It was kind of like an ecclesiastical libertarianism.
Sounds like we need some separation of church and state up in here, but all right.
I'll mention here as well that I got a good amount of my research for this episode from an article called An Anonymous Account of Mary Anning, Fossil Collector of Lyme Regis, Dorset, England, which was published in All the Year Round in 1865 and is attributed to Henry Stuart Fagan, schoolmaster, parson, and author.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Also, it's an anonymous account, and if it's going to be anonymous, don't put your name on it.
It's attributed to, though. This is just people thinking that's who wrote it.
So her father, it seems, would spend time on the cliffs of Dorset, subsidising his income by fossil collecting, sending off his finds to tourists. People knew about fossils. I mean, the Megalosaurus probably was the first dinosaur to ever be described scientifically, and that was about 1819. And this was by British fossil hunter William Buckland, someone Mary Anning knew well. Lyme Regis at this time was buzzing, mainly because people wanted to go to the seaside and no one could really go to France because France was on fire. The revolution was taking place, so it wasn't the best place to be. But lots of people were selling curios, fossils, snake stones, which would probably be ammonites, devil's fingers, which are belemnites, from Lyme Regis.
I bet they would like write your name on it too and put it in a tiny little necklace for you to wear.
They still do that in Lyme Regis.
Write your name on a grain of rice.
I have found many an ammonite and belemnite on the beaches at Lyme Regis. I have such fond memories of Lyme Regis specifically, and West Bay, which is like a really small town near there where we'd rent a little caravan as a family. Lyme Regis was, for one geological reason or another, just one of the best places to find these. Though the winter was the best time because the weather would cause landslides, which could expose new finds to hunters, which made the pastime kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like how surfing in a storm is good because the waves are bigger.
Right.
So Molly and Richard have 10 children, as was the style at the time.
That's a lot of kids. That's a fertile womb. You know what I mean?
Well, as was also the style at the time, not all of them survived.
Right.
One terrible story is her first child, Mary. There's a lot of Marys in this. Molly's real name is also Mary. When their first child was around 4, she died when her clothes caught fire, probably messing with the fire in the house. The Bath Chronicle, which is a town in Britain, Bath,
I read Jane Austen. I know Bath.
said that a child 4 years of age of Mr. R. Anning, a cabinet maker of Lyme, was left by the mother for about 5 minutes in a room where there were some shavings. The girl's clothes caught fire and she was dreadfully burnt as to cause her death.
Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I have ever heard.
Absolutely horrific. Our Mary was born 5 months later, named after her sister.
And never allowed near flame. She was cold her whole life.
Yeah. Well, you'll find out now that she wasn't cold for all of it. Out of the 10 children, only Mary and one older brother, Joseph, survived.
Holy cow.
Which, from morbid fact, was just kind of average for the UK at that time.
Yeah.
But Mary's survival was lucky, to put it mildly. Because on the 19th of August, 1800, when Mary was 15 months old, she was being held by her neighbour, Elizabeth Haskins.
Elizabeth, what did you do?
Well, they were chatting under an elm tree while watching a horse show of some sort. The tree must have been the tallest one around because it got struck by lightning that instantly killed all 3 women, including Elizabeth.
What the heck?
Everyone runs over, they stick Mary in a bath of hot water, and she survives.
Holy cow.
Baby Mary's health is meant to have improved after this jolt. And this sounds like something from the past, but I mean, you could get struck by lightning at any point, Paula. Live life for the day. It's a real risk. Carpe YOLO, Paula.
Carpe YOLO. My jaw hurts from how much my mouth has hung open by the way this story has started. I thought we were going to talk about fossils, and instead we're talking about a cursed family. Honestly, cursed.
It does sound something that could happen in the past, Paula, but trust me, you could get hit by lightning at any time.
Well, I mean, it's not super, likely, though, okay? It's pretty, it could happen, but it probably won't.
Don't go outside. So, long before she was known for fossils, Mary was kind of known as the girl who was struck by lightning. She was smart and curious, and while her church taught her to read and write, she was pretty uneducated. She did have the love of one book, though, the Dissenters Theological Magazine and Review. Their own pastor had 2 essays in this review all about how God had created the world in 6 days, and the other urged dissenters to study the new science of geology. So that's what Mary went and did.
This is very interesting. Hey, study geology, even though it's going to make it harder to believe that God created the world in 6 days, potentially.
Well, think about it this way. It's an independent church, and the guy who's the pastor is interested in science and open to the ideas that many other churches would not have been open to at the time.
Yeah.
Also, remember how I said that fossil hunting could be dangerous? Well, Mary's dad had come down with tuberculosis while recovering from a fall off a cliff. And in November 1810, at only 44, he died, leaving the family in a really bad spot. No money, no savings, but debt. So the family had their little table of curios that they would collect and sell at the coach stop in town. But then in 1811, when Mary was 12, it was her brother who found a 4-foot ichthyosaur skull.
What? Can you imagine living in a time where you could literally find a skull of something like that?
That
just
time
doesn't
is today.
happen.
You could do that.
How? No. Oh, it's all been found.
Here's the thing, Paula. You can go to Lyme Regis today and find an ichthyosaur. You
What?
just can. 100%.
Then why haven't we done it?
Me and you personally,
Yeah.
or the human race?
No, you and me personally.
Let's do it. Let's go to Lyme Regis
Yeah.
and do a live recording of a podcast. Me and you fossil hunting. I'd love that.
I want to find an intact dinosaur skull.
Then we can go crab fishing. Then we can get some fish and chips.
Perfect.
Man,
Eat some cockles.
we could eat some cockles. Also, the beaches in Lyme Regis are perfect beaches because they're stone beaches, not ghastly sand. I hate sand.
How am I supposed to walk barefoot on stone?
I hate sand. There's some beautiful sand beaches on the south coast, obviously, but there's some great beaches which are rocks. I'm always going to pick a rock beach over a sand beach any day of the week.
Weird.
I hate sand. Sand is the worst. I'm like Anakin Skywalker.
Sand sucks, but rocks that's not a beach.
What are you going to skim? You can't skim stones on a sand beach.
Not skimming anything into an ocean. There are waves. Skipping rocks is for a lake, okay?
You skim between the waves. But anyway.
Oh my gosh. I can't do it whether there are waves or not.
It might be my only true skill, skimming stones. So Joseph's found this ichthyosaur skull. And then also, if I pronounce any dinosaur names wrong, just my bad. I'm trying.
No one knows how to say them.
No one knows how the ichthyosaurs refer to themselves, Paula.
Exactly. So just do your best, and the ichthyosaur will forgive you.
Mary goes and has a closer look at where this ichthyosaur skull was found. And she looks a little closer and found the rest of it. They managed to sell this incredible find for £23.
Wow.
This was a lifeline of money for the family. Yes,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been an episode of Remember without me going to the Bank of England inflation calculator to tell you that £23 is now £1,600, which is like $2,000.
Yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Huge lifeline. This ichthyosaur, which I guess the best way to describe it would be terrifying dolphin, was sold to a local lord who then sold it to a well-known collector, and it went on display in London. If you want to see it yourself now, I'm pretty sure it's in the Oxford University Museum and the Natural History today, so you can go there. But things weren't going well for the family,
Because they're cursed.
which is where Lieutenant Colonel Thomas James Birch comes in, who was one of their better buyers. He saw the situation they were in, decided to hold an auction for them. In a letter to a paleontologist, Gideon Mantell, on the 5th of March of that year, there was to be a sale, quote, for the benefit of the poor woman and her son and daughter of Lyme, who have in truth found almost all of the fine things which have been submitted to scientific investigation. I may never again possess what I am about to part with, yet in doing it, I shall have the satisfaction of knowing that the money will be well applied.
Wow. Oh, that's really nice.
So he goes to bat for them, finds all his paleontologist buddies and people, collectors from all over the world, and there were going to be collectors from all over the world for the things that Mary Anning was finding. And the auction raised $34,000 in today's money.
Holy crap.
Which is pretty good for a family who were down to selling their furniture.
Wow.
Most of which had probably been made by their late carpenter father.
Ugh.
Mary is now the main fossil collector of the family. This is what she's doing for a living. It's dangerous work. In 1833, she's caught in a landslide that...
The landslide knocked her down.
Well, it's very unfortunate
Uh-oh.
because their dog does not survive the landslide.
No, why you let me make a joke?
They had a dog called Trey that didn't make it.
Trey.
And that makes me very sad. Much more sad than the father dying, I'll be honest.
Trey, what a good boy.
And she almost died in this. There's rain and snow on dangerous cliffs, and this is what she has to do to make a living. It's incredibly dangerous. But the quality of her work was really beginning to be noticed. In 1823, she finds a complete plesiosaur. Think Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Then the first British pterosaurs. Think flying death lizard bird. She'd begun to study the field in a real way, making remarkable hand-drawn illustrations in books that she'd been able to borrow. And she'd even started to perform her own dissections on related animals of today to understand how the bones might go together.
Wow, that's interesting.
She's able to buy a little house with a shop front. Anning's Fossil Depot.
Wow, is that really what she calls it? Or do you make that up?
Yeah.
What?
Anning's
That's
Fossil
so
Depot.
cute.
It garnered trade from people who came from all around the world to see what she'd found.
Wow.
Collectors from America, museums went to her to buy exhibits. King Frederick Augustus II of Saxony brought an ichthyosaur skeleton. She was becoming the foremost expert in a field that she wasn't even allowed to be in.
Why don't we have a TV show about her?
Well, I'll tell you now, they actually recently put a statue up on her.
Oh.
In 1839, she wrote to the Magazine of Natural History, telling them that their claim of recently discovered fossil of the prehistoric shark Hybodus represented a new genus. Well, they were wrong. She knew it was wrong because she discovered the existence of fossil sharks with both straight and hooked teeth years ago.
She's
So
like,
it wasn't a new genus.
Actually,
If this is new, then what do I have?
Yeah.
I've already got one of those. But it was the early 1800s. She really wasn't wanted or welcome in science. She wasn't even allowed to join the Geological Society of London.
She was barely allowed to just talk, you know?
But I'll mention this now. She's not allowed to join the Geology Society of London, right? Mary Anning is known as the most influential British geologist of all time. She's only second to Darwin, who isn't known for geology.
Wow.
He just happens to be a geologist.
Yeah.
When you type in most famous geologist, it comes up with Darwin, who isn't famous for geology.
Yeah.
Mary Anning is famous for geology.
Not even allowed to join a thing. Dumb rules.
But people were starting to print papers on the finds she was making, but often wouldn't mention that she had been the one to find what they were talking about.
So frustrating.
But this wasn't just because she was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
This is because she's working class. When a coal miner brought up a new specimen from a coal seam in Cornwall, it was the London gentleman who had bought it that would claim the scientific discovery.
That makes me mad.
It's infuriating.
Makes me really mad.
One discovery Anning does have her claim to is solving the mystery of these mysterious conical fossils, which no one could really work out what they were. And Anning knew that they were fossilized dinosaur droppings. They're what we call coprolites now. Thank God they weren't discovered. I'll say thank God they were discovered in a country that uses euphemisms. And today, if you find a coprolite, it's exciting. Finding a coprolite's great. It's still a fossil.
It's poop that's been turned into a rock. It's basically a diamond. You know what I'm saying? It's just like how coal gets turned into a diamond, poop gets turned into a fossil diamond.
But it's now, even though she isn't respected on paper, that she is deeply respected by many of the others in the field. People know and recognise her as the expert when it comes to the Jurassic coast of Britain. No one else even comes close. The problem is that the economy by the 1830s just wasn't doing as well. And in a way, Mary was dealing with luxury goods.
Yeah, it's like dealing in art, right? Like,
and the demand, not unlike a coprolite, Paula, the demand for fossils had dried up. And as she wasn't able to make a living from publication on her findings, she fell once again on hard times.
It's such a bummer.
It's a huge miscarriage of justice in many ways. She's the leader of this field and she should have that right. But Lieutenant Birch comes to the rescue again. He commissions a lithographic print, one of those black and white etchings you see on old books. He gets it coloured and made all beautiful. It depicts how dinosaurs would have looked in the natural wild, with a lot of the money going to Mary.
Well,
But there were some bad investments in Mary's future in which she loses the majority of her savings. But William Buckland, who we mentioned at the start, he gets the British Association for the Advancement of Science to essentially set her up with a pension.
oh, wow.
Something called an annuity, because
Yeah.
after all, she had devoted her life to science. So it really was the very least they could do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it sounds like she like kind of put Britain on the map for these kinds of important geological discoveries. And they owe her. The country, the scientific community owes her. And it's cool they set up like a yearly allowance basically for her.
The fact is, she really understood what she was doing. She would work out how things went together. She knew the best ways to find fossils. She knew where to go. She was fantastic at this. And she made huge advancements on the Jurassic period, specifically on the Jurassic coast. It's her addition to this field cannot be overlooked. She's incredibly important. She's, to this day, an incredibly important geologist.
Well, there's a whole exhibit about her and her findings
Yeah.
at the Natural History Museum that we were at.
Because I told you last
Yeah.
year, I was like, we should do an episode on her because she's fascinating. And I've known about Mary Anning my entire life.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, I used to go to Lyme Regis all the time. Well, once a year for about 5 days. But it was great.
Is it called the Jurassic Coast because of the plethora of discoveries made there that are specifically from the Jurassic period?
It's not just called the Jurassic Coast because it's a cool name that comes from, like, after Jurassic Park came out.
Right.
I believe the majority of the stuff found there is from the Jurassic period. I'm pretty sure.
That would make sense.
This annuity, though, would not need to be paid out for long.
Oh.
Mary developed breast cancer when she was only 47.
Gosh.
And just like so many others in her position, she was taking massive amounts of laudanum, which is opium, essentially. And many believe that she'd simply become a drunk and she died.
Well, laudanum really, that can mess you up and make you just totally out of it, and you can get addicted to it. And
yeah, she became an addict in a later life to laudanum, which is for the pain relief, obviously, of what she was going through. It completely makes sense, and it's not an unusual end to so many people. But her death isn't unnoticed. There's a stained glass window made in her honor, and the president of the Geological Society published a eulogy. In fact, this was the first time the society had ever honored a woman.
wow.
Quote, I cannot close this notice of our losses by death without adverting to that of one who thought not placed among even the easier classes of society, but one who had to earn her daily bread by her labour, yet contributed by her talent and untiring researches in no small degree to our knowledge of the great ichthyosaurians and other forms of organic life entombed in the vicinity of Lyme Regis. It's perhaps difficult to imagine the landscape of British paleontology without her. Her contributions, Mary worked tirelessly in order to make them. Against convention and with conviction, she changed the landscape of British science and was one of the foremost cutting bows that allowed the ship of progress for women in science to follow.
I like her. Yeah.
And while things in the United Kingdom may have been rather civil, if not old-fashioned, a war was breaking out in America. Two men were about to attempt to destroy each other on the hunt for bones. All that and more in the next episode.
Are you doing it to be continued? What a tease. What else could you expect from the King of Boning?
Well, we're going to be talking about the Bone Walls. It's literally called the Bone Walls. It's so good.
I'm excited to do more fossil talk. Give it to me.
Bone me, Daddy.
Why are we so fascinated with finding the remains of people and creatures from so long ago? It's just, I don't know, it awakens something within our human spirit, I guess. Maybe it makes us feel connected to
I can tell you why I like
creation.
fossils. It's because you are touching the past. You're reaching, physically, tangibly touching history. They found, one of my favorite things, and I look at it all the time, is they found a intact, had been preserved, I believe, in some way, probably in a peat bog or something. I just look at the picture every now and again because it comes up all the time. But it's of a Viking woman's clothes. And then there's a model wearing a replica of what that Viking woman would look like. This like short skirt and like Viking tank top, essentially. It looks very like, if someone had put it on screen, you'd go, it's a bit revealing. It's not really what the Vikings did. It's like, we found it in a Viking grave. This is exactly what they wore. And it's just fast. I love looking at it because it's just, wow, that is what someone would look like. And it's just these tangible touches that you can grab. I love it when you go to a museum and you see like a stela or something like that, or an inscription on a building or like something. And I love standing right in front of it because that is where the people would have stood to look at it. Or the person with the chisel would have stood.
When you can see like the texture. We've talked about this, in museums before. Like you can see the texture of the carving or whatever, and you go, it's almost like it's a link. It's a link to the past, not in a video game way.
I really think it's important to experience those things when you get the opportunity to, because sometimes you see like a cuneiform tablet and there's fingerprints in it.
It's just cool.
Nail marks, and you can see where a hair has been removed or something. Or cat prints or something, Well,
even in my, there's a concrete slab in one of the little like walkway areas in my backyard from the 20s. No, it would have been the 30s. From the 30s, that has two kids' handprints put into them with like the date and carved in. And it's been out in the elements for years and years and years now. So like it's almost worn through. But man, I love that. I'm like, whoever first lived in this house, that's like their kids. And they marked that in here, and it makes me feel, or like going down to the Chinese theater, which may not be called the Chinese theater anymore, but where all the stars, put their handprints and footprints, Grauman's Chinese theater, and you can see which ones are worn out, like which ones everyone puts their hands in, or which ones everyone matches their feet to. And you're like, I am putting my hands where Bing Crosby put his hands. And it's just cool. Thank you so much for bringing this story to us, Matthew. And I'm excited to learn more about how this story sort of continues in a tangential kind of way in the Bone Wars. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Remember. We appreciate you so much. And if you watched it on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. There is something that you can do for us no matter where you consumed this. You can subscribe to whatever feed you are choosing to consume this. I don't know how I feel about the word consume, but you know what I mean. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or subscribe to the podcast feed. Leave us a comment if you're on YouTube, or if you're on a podcast feed, leave us a rating and review. Perhaps one that sounds something like this that AM5184917 left us. This podcast talks about a good mix of topics from history and handles them both with humor and with deep consideration. The hosts Matthew and Paula engage with each other's topics with playful curiosity and are always interesting to listen to. That's incredibly kind. Thank you for that 5-star review. If you do that for us, that really helps us. It helps us get noticed by more people, and we would love to share our interest in these topics with as many people as possible. Tell someone you think might enjoy the show about the show, and we'd appreciate it very much. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
And don't you forget it.